They don't cancel me. I cancel them.
Just because you're offended, it doesn't mean you're right. I'm often asked if there's anything you shouldn't joke about, and the answer is no. There's no subject out of bounds for comedy. There's nothing you shouldn't joke about, but it depends what the joke is. Comedy comes from a good or a bad place. And I think I do deal in taboo subjects very often. I often, expose the elephant in the room, but people often make the mistake of the target of a joke with the subject of a joke, and they're not the same. No bad comes from discussing taboo subjects and I think as a comedian, my job isn't just to make people laugh, it's to make them think a bit. I want to take the audiences to places they haven't been before. Otherwise, what am I doing there? If they can do it themselves or they've heard it before, there's enough safe anodyne comedy out there, and good luck to them, but that's not what I do. They know what I do, and I'm going to do it. Having said that, someone is going to be offended by everything you say. Someone, somewhere in the world, will find what you say offensive. So what? Who cares?
I want to see if you can guess who it is I'm doing an impression of. All right, let me get into character. You got to guess who it is, though. Okay, here it goes. Hey, if you do anything wrong in your life, and I find out about it, I'm going to try to take everything away from you. And I don't care when I find out. Could be today, tomorrow, 15, 20 years from now. If I find out, you're fucking finished. Who's that? That's you. That's what the audience sounds like to me. That's why I don't be coming out doing comedy all the time, because y'all niggas is the worst motherfuckers I've ever tried to entertain in my fucking life.
Now, if all of this begins to put you in mind of so-called politically correct language, or politically correct speech, excuse me, then you and I are on the same track. So let's visit that playground of guilty white liberals, the land of the politically correct. In recent years, the PC folks have found some new ways of shading the truth in order to make people feel better, especially minorities. One of the newer phrases making the rounds is happens to be. He happens to be black. I have a friend who happens to be black. Oh, I see, yes. Like it's an accident, Happens to be black. Yes, he happens to be black. I see. He had two black parents? Yes, that's right, two black parents. Yes, I see. And they had sex? Oh, indeed they did. I see. So where does the surprise part come in? I should think it would be more unusual if he just happened to be Scandinavian. Another favorite term, recently favorite term, is openly gay. I have a friend who's openly gay. But that's the only minority they use that for. You wouldn't say someone was openly black. Well, maybe James Brown. Yes. James Brown, yes. Or Louis Farrakhan. Louis Farrakhan is openly black. Colin Powell is not openly black. Colin Powell is openly white. He just happens to be black. And while we're at it, when did the word urban become synonymous with the word black? Did I sleep through this, perhaps? Urban styles, urban trends, urban music. I was not consulted on this at all again. Didn't get an email, didn't get a fax, didn't get a postcard. That's fine, let them go. So I would like to tell you how I handle some of these speech issues concerning minorities. First of all, I say black. I say black because most black people prefer black. I don't say people of color because it's dishonest. It means precisely the same thing as colored people, which is an insult. So if you're not willing to say colored people, you shouldn't be willing to say people of color. And besides, to me, the whole idea of color seems a bit specious, really. I mean, what should we call white people? People of no color? Isn't pink a color? And in fact, white people are not really white at all. They're different shades of pink and olive and beige. In other words, they're colored. And black people are rarely black. I see mostly various shades of brown and tan, and in fact, some light-skinned black people are darker than the darkest white people. I'm sorry, lighter than the darkest white people. Look how dark the people in India are. They're dark brown, but they're considered white. May I see the color chart, please? People of color is an awkward phrase that obscures meaning rather than enhancing it. What shall we call fat people? People of size? I also don't say African Americans. I find it cumbersome and confusing. Which part of Africa are we talking about? Egypt? Egypt is in Africa, but Egyptians aren't black. They're like the people in India. They're dark brown white people. But they're Africans. So why wouldn't an Egyptian citizen who becomes an Egyptian who becomes a U.S. citizen be called an African American? The same would apply to South Africa. Suppose a white racist from South Africa becomes an American citizen. Couldn't he call himself an African American? If for no other reason than just to bother black people. And what about a black person born in South Africa who becomes an American citizen? Is he an African American or is he a South African American? Or is he simply a South African American African American? You know, it's just so much more tedious liberal labeling. Liberals should be taught that labels divide people, and I think we could probably do with fewer labels, not more. Now, one more group, the Indians. I call them Indians because that's what they are. They're the Indians. There's nothing wrong with the word. First of all, it's important to know that Indian, that word probably does not derive from Columbus believing he had reached India in 1492. India was called Hindustan. More likely, the word derives from Columbus's description of the people he found here. He was an Italian who spoke very poor Spanish, and in his written accounts, he called the Indians una gente in Dios, a people in God. In God, in Dios, Indians. It's a perfectly noble thing. And I simply can't justify this awkward phrase, Native Americans. First of all, they're not natives. They came here from Asia over the Bering Land Bridge. In fact, there are no natives anywhere in the world. Everyone is from somewhere else. All people are refugees, immigrants, or aliens. If there are natives anywhere, it would have to be people still living in the Great Rift Valley in Africa. So everyone is just visiting. So much for native. As far as calling them Americans is concerned, well, how can I say this? We steal their hemisphere, destroy 500 cultures, kill 20 million, stick the rest of them on the worst land we can find, and then as a special bonus, we name them after ourselves.
Well, I just think like comics are crybabies, and like, give me a break. You get up there and you talk for an hour, and then they have an impulse to be heard too. You know what I mean? This is if it's rock and roll, well, who cares what they think about it? And truly, like political correctness with young people, for me, it's an overcorrection for a serious problem like bigotry and racism. And yeah, they've swung the other way, and yeah, they're a little irony deaf. But I'll take like an irony deaf, tolerant crowd over a racist crowd that really understands the workings of comedy and irony. I mean, if it infringes on free speech and all that stuff, I'm against it, and I'm totally against them even in theory. Yes, of course they shouldn't be. Of course they should get this. I've had jokes that I thought were taken as the very thing they were satirizing. You know, like were seen as racist when it was meant to be the exact opposite of that. But you know, that's part of the gamble of what performing is. It's meant to be interpreted in any way it can. And I don't know, I'm just like, you know, my mother's a hospice nurse, so it's hard for me to look at, you know, a couple college kids with signs outside a comedy show and think that I'm, you know, up against anything structurally. And yeah, sometimes I think the pendulum has swung the other way, a little too far from whatever, but it's a good direction, you know, and it'll correct itself in the middle. But no comedians are being, you know, thrown in jail. They're getting like lit up on Twitter maybe a few times. They go through, you know, and that's wrong and maybe bad sometimes. But again, this is from people who have had their opinions heard relentlessly, hours every night, all the time. And then a blogger gets up and expresses their opinion in a blog, and it's like, what? I mean, I don't understand it. It makes no, how do you not understand that the audience has the same impulse you do?
It's just that when there's retribution on Twitter, it can be a tidal wave.
Totally, absolutely, yeah, that's its own thing, and that's horrific. And when someone tweets a little joke that's misunderstood and their life is ruined, and they get fired from their job, that's awful. But that is not PCness to me. That is internet being unrestrained and anonymous and horrifying and violent and quick and too many people at once. I think those two things are conflated a little too often. I'm saying because the PCness that I really see railed against is just college kids figuring out how to think and maybe being a little too protective of certain things, which is like, you know, well, that's what college is for, I think.
You know, it's a nonsense to believe that some people deserve never to be offended their whole life. You know, it's great, and even in universities, there's people that I mean, we're better to hear different ideas and argue. The great thing about freedom of speech, if an arsehole is being an arsehole, you've got the right to call him an arsehole.
People had tweeted at me when I said I'm interviewing with Jerry Seinfeld. Ask him about their gender diversity on the show.
Yeah, I mean, people think it's the census or something. I mean, this has got to represent the actual pie chart of America. Who cares? It's just funny. You know, funny is the world that I live in. You're funny, I'm interested. You're not funny, I'm not interested. Okay. And I have no interest in gender or race or anything like that. But everyone else is kind of with their little calculating, is this the exact right mix? You know, I think that's, to me, it's anti-comedy. It's anti-comedy. It's more about, you know, PC nonsense than are you making us laugh or not?
Right.